Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name is Commander Nathaniel Cole, United States Navy. I am the commanding officer of the USS Nevada, an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine. As I write this into the ship's logbook, we are on the 367th day since confirmed shore communications ceased. That means it's been exactly 1 year since the world above ended. I never thought the responsibility of guarding 24 Trident 2D-5 missiles would turn into guarding the last fragments of humanity aboard this steel coffin. But here we are. It started subtly. No alarms. No sudden shift in orders. The Nevada had been deployed in the North Pacific, running a scheduled deterrent patrol. Our orders were as mundane as they were critical. Stay hidden. Maintain launch readiness. Remain undetected. The crew of 155 was used to long, silent stretches, where the only sounds were the deep hum of the reactor's coolant pumps and the occasional hiss of air through the life support systems. On a submarine, silence is survival, not just from the enemy, but from the crushing pressure that waits outside the hull. Our last confirmed surface contact was with Naval Base Kitsap, Bangor, Washington. It was March 14th of last year. We'd been on station for 3 weeks, just west of the Aleutians, running deep at 250 meters. At first, the unusual chatter on the emergency frequencies was just background noise. Garbled reports of violent civil disturbances in Seattle, Los Angeles, New York. Then came a short encrypted flash message from Submarine Group 9. Condition Zulu, maintain radio silence unless authorized. Stand by for updated targeting orders. We never got those orders. Within 12 hours, the VLF, very low frequency broadcast channels went dead. The ELF, extremely low frequency signal meant to penetrate the oceans at depth for last resort command, faded a day later. The Nevada drifted in informational darkness. For most of my crew, the thought that the continental United States could simply stop talking was impossible. For me, it was terrifying. We surfaced under cover of night off the coast of British Columbia to raise the radio masts and try a long-range HF sweep. Nothing but static. I ordered Lieutenant Commander Sarah Green, RXO, to scan the civilian AM bands. That's when we heard the first fragment of the new world. A shaky voice on a Vancouver frequency, describing people attacking each other in the streets, the government collapsing, and something about the infected not staying down after being shot. I ordered us back to depth. Life aboard an Ohio-class submarine is claustrophobic, even in peacetime. Every compartment is crammed with equipment, cabling, pipes, and the constant presence of other people. Privacy is non-existent. You eat shoulder to shoulder in the mess, sleep in stacked bunks barely wide enough to roll over, and share 2 showers for over 100 men and women. The smell is a mix of machine oil, human sweat, and the faint metallic tang of recycled air. Normally, you endure it because you know there's an end date the day you pull back into port. Now, that day no longer existed. For the first month, we followed standing orders, patrol silently, avoid detection, and be ready to launch if ordered. The Trident 2D-5 missiles in tubes 1 through 24 sat in their launch tubes, each the size of a city bus, inert but waiting. My missile division, led by Lieutenant Kevin Ortiz, ran constant system checks. If the world had truly gone silent, those missiles might be the last weapons of their kind still operational. That made the Nevada both the most useless and the most dangerous ship afloat. Morale began to fray by the end of the second month. Rumors spread in the tight steel corridors like an infection of their own. Some believed the Navy was still operational somewhere, maybe in hidden bunkers. Others were certain everyone we knew was gone. Chief of the boat, Marcus Delaney, my most trusted senior enlisted man, was the one who kept the younger sailors focused. running drills and keeping discipline tight. Delaney had served on submarines for 25 years and understood that fear was the most corrosive force in confined quarters. We tried raising other submarines, the USS Kentucky, USS Louisiana, USS Alabama, no response. We even sent a discreet ping request to British Vanguard-class subs, hoping for Allied contact. Nothing. By day 120, food became our first real problem. An Ohio class carries about 90 days' worth of fresh and frozen stores, with some stretch capacity if rationed carefully. Normally, resupply comes from a tender ship or a quick port visit. Now there were no tenders, no ports. We'd stretched to 4 months by cutting fresh water production for cooking and rehydrating freeze-dried stores instead. Our culinary specialist, Petty Officer First Class Raymond Sato, became the most important man aboard, inventing ways to make powdered eggs and canned vegetables taste like something more than desperation. We were running near the Midway Atoll when we spotted our first surface vessel in 6 months, a rusted container ship drifting, its AIS transponder dead. Through the periscope, we saw movement on deck. At first, we thought it was survivors. Then we realized they were moving strangely unsteady, lurching. They stumbled into railings and each other, yet never fell overboard. I didn't need to see their faces to know what they were. The infection had reached the sea. We slipped away, silent running, our sonar picking up faint, irregular splashes as some of them fell into the water. By the time the 1-year mark approached, the Nevada had become something more than a warship. She was a lifeboat, an ark carrying 142 human beings who were, for all we knew, the last organized fragment of the United States Navy. I had ordered all identifying markings on the sail painted over. Our patrol zones now followed no Navy chart. We moved where food might be scavenged, where diesel ships might be lurking to raid, where uninhabited islands might give us a few days of fresh air. The psychological strain on the crew was relentless. People dreamt of sunlight and open air. We rotated topside exposure during periscope depth transits, letting small teams emerge on the sail for a few minutes to breathe real air. We enforced strict noise discipline at depth. No drop tools, no sudden machinery spikes, because somewhere out there, hostile forces might still exist. And in this new world, any human contact could be worse than none. Still, there were moments of quiet humanity. On Christmas Eve, Petty Officer Sato somehow produced a cake from ration packs. On New Year's, our sonar technician, Ensign Lisa Moore, patched in an old recording of fireworks from Sydney and played it over the intercom. We all listened in silence, picturing a world that no longer was. Our fuel was nuclear, that wasn't the problem. The S8G reactor in the Nevada's belly could run for decades without refueling. Our limits were food, medical supplies, and sanity. The torpedo room held 4 Maukei 48 AD caps loaded and ready, but they weren't for defense against ships anymore. Now they were insurance against something worse finding us. I kept the crew busy with constant training, flooding drills, reactor scrams, missile system maintenance. But privately, I knew the inevitable was coming, a decision point where we could no longer simply hide beneath the waves. We'd need to surface, to make landfall somewhere, to resupply and possibly encounter whatever was left of humanity. That decision came faster than I expected. It started with a single contact on sonar, a faint propeller signature at extreme range. At first, we thought it might be a drifting merchant vessel. Then the signature sharpened into the profile of another submarine. I was in the control room when the sonar supervisor, Petty Officer Second Class Donald Reese, quietly slid his chair back from the console and glanced at me. He didn't need to say anything. The trace on the waterfall display was enough. The narrowband analysis showed a steady beat, 5 blades, the harmonics suggesting a nuclear-powered attack sub, not a diesel. This wasn't just debris in the water. This was a living, moving steel predator, hundreds of feet long, running deep. We dropped to ultra-quiet immediately. Auxiliary machinery was secured. and the crew's movements were restricted to essential watchstanders only. I signaled Lieutenant Commander Green to bring us a few meters deeper and ordered sonar to run a full acoustic library comparison. When the ID came back, my stomach tightened. It was consistent with a Virginia-class attack submarine. That meant it was almost certainly American, or at least it had been once. In the old world, a meeting between two US Navy subs would have been routine if coordinated by Fleet Command. In this world, it was something else entirely. No one could say if the crew on that boat was still Navy in any meaningful sense, or if desperation had turned them into scavengers willing to kill for supplies. The last year had taught me to assume the latter until proven otherwise. The contact held steady at about 12 nautical miles off our bow, moving at 5 knots, slow enough to be listening as well. I ordered us to maintain our depth and course, but shift to parallel tracking at a slight offset. We would shadow them for now, see if they blinked first. Green kept her voice low as she worked the control planes. The atmosphere in the control room was tight, the only sound the muted hum of electronics and the occasional whisper between sonar and fire control. After 4 hours of parallel running, something changed. The contact slowed almost to a stop. Then, a single active sonar ping rolled through the water, a sharp, metallic crack that echoed in our hull. They knew we were here, and they were letting us know they knew. This was no accident. They were forcing the issue. We could have matched their boldness with our own ping, but I didn't want to escalate yet. Instead, I ordered a slow ascent to periscope depth, keeping the other sub's position on our flank. If they wanted to talk, they'd have to be above the thermocline, where our communications masts could reach out. Green gave me a questioning look as I made the decision she knew, as well as I did, that exposing ourselves could be a fatal mistake. But the alternative was letting them dictate the encounter. Breaking the surface, even partially, was always a strange moment after so long submerged. The sail rose into choppy grey water, and I brought up the photonics mast, scanning the horizon. Through the drizzle, I spotted the silhouette of a sail just over 2 miles away, too far to make out markings, but close enough to confirm it was indeed a Virginia class. The other sub was at periscope depth as well, her sail's black tower just breaking the waves. We raised the radio masts and switched to a secure UHF channel, sending out a general challenge in the clear. Unidentified submarine at position. This is USS Nevada, SSBN 733. Respond and identify. For a long minute, there was nothing but static. Then a voice, male, American, came back hoarse, as if unused to speaking for long stretches. Nevada, this is USS Texas, SSN 775. Commanding Officer Captain David Mercer speaking. It's good to hear another American voice. The relief in his tone was guarded, and mine was no less so when I replied. The Texas had been on patrol out of Pearl Harbor when the outbreak spread. They'd lost all contact within the same week we had. For the first few months, they tried to re-establish comms, even surfacing near San Diego, where they'd seen the coastline burning. Mercer reported that his crew was down to 73 after a brutal boarding attempt by what he described as feral survivors on a fishing trawler in the mid-Pacific. They'd fought them off with small arms, but it had cost them people and ammunition. We arranged a cautious meet at sea, both boats surfacing fully in the open ocean, staying 1,000 yards apart. Through binoculars, I could see their sail was scarred with pitted rust streaks, paint worn by weather. They'd been riding high on the surface more than I would ever have risked. We transferred a small team by RHIB, under strict rules, 5 of mine, 5 of his, all armed, but muzzles down. The meeting in their wardroom was tense but strangely emotional. Seeing new faces after a year in the same steel corridors felt like stepping into another world. Mercer was lean, his eyes sunken, but he still carried himself like a CO. His XO, Lieutenant Commander Aaron Vance, looked younger than his years, but his handshake was firm. Over vacuum-packed coffee, we compared notes. The Texas had been scavenging atolls and derelict ships, much like us, but they were nearly out of medical supplies. In return, They had an excess of dry goods from a seized freighter, enough rice and canned tuna to extend our endurance by months. The unspoken truth hung between us. 2 submarines meant double the firepower, double the eyes, but also double the mouths to feed. Any alliance would be temporary unless we found a sustainable resupply option, and neither of us had a working plan for that. As we prepared to part ways, Mercer asked the question I'd been dreading since we made contact. "Cole, what's your plan for the missiles?" His eyes stayed locked on mine, and I could tell this wasn't idle curiosity. The Trident IIs aboard Nevada were still fully armed, a fact that might tempt anyone who believed there was a remaining enemy to strike. I told him the truth, or at least my truth. Without verified lawful orders from surviving US command authority, those weapons would remain sealed. He nodded slowly, but said nothing. We shook hands, our crews exchanged supplies, and we went our separate ways, Texas diving south, Nevada angling west toward the Philippines. But something about Mercer's gaze lingered with me. In this new world, trust was fragile, and 2 nuclear submarines crossing paths was no coincidence. 3 nights later, sonar reported a contact astern, holding steady at extreme range, same blade count, same harmonic signature. The USS Texas was following us. There are few feelings worse for a submarine commander than realizing another boat is shadowing you. It means you've lost the initiative. It means the other captain is deciding the pace and terms of the game. I was in my cabin when the duty officer woke me, and within a minute, I was back in the control room, staring at the tactical display. The Texas wasn't closing. She wasn't drifting away. She was simply holding station, matching every minor change in our course, as if we were tethered together by an invisible line. Lieutenant Commander Green kept her eyes on the navigation chart while I studied the sonar trace. "Could be coincidence," she said quietly, though she didn't sound convinced. We both knew better. A Virginia-class has world-class passive sonar. Mercer would have no trouble tracking an Ohio-class at this range. And if he wanted to disappear, he could yet. Here he was, making sure we knew he was there. We cut speed to bare steerageway, trying to see if he'd overrun us. He matched. We changed depth by 40 meters to take advantage of a colder thermal layer. He adjusted within minutes. This wasn't passive drifting. He was actively tailing us and doing it well. I ordered us onto a zigzag, evasive pattern. Our sound profile at 5 knots is nearly a whisper, but the ocean is never silent. Currents shift, pressure layers bend sound, distant storms create low-frequency noise. In peacetime, these are just factors to account for. Now, they were my allies. After 2 hours of maneuvering, we had slipped into a deep, narrow channel between 2 seamounts, a place where sonar reflections turn chaotic. We cut propulsion and drifted in the black water. Reactors still running, but cooling pumps at their quietest setting. For 6 hours, there was nothing on sonar except the distant groan of the seafloor and the faint crackle of shrimp in the thermocline above. Then, just as I was beginning to think Mercer had broken off, the trace reappeared, same bearing, slightly closer. He'd waited us out. There was no mistaking it now. The Texas was hunting us. The question was why? That night, I lay in my narrow bunk, staring at the riveted steel above me. I thought about our meeting, the hollow look in Mercer's eyes, the way his XO had seemed to size up our crew more than listen to our words. Supplies might be part of it, but supplies could be traded. No, what we carried in our missile tubes was something Mercer couldn't get anywhere else. 24 nuclear warheads, each capable of erasing a city. In the old world, those weapons were a deterrent. In this one, they were a bargaining chip or a crown. Whoever held them could claim to be the last true military power on Earth. I woke Green before her watch and told her to prepare the ship for a potential confrontation. Fire control ran silent checks on the 4 Make 48 AD cap torpedoes in the tubes, making sure the guidance systems were pristine. The crew sensed the shift in the air. No one said battle stations, but the hushed, deliberate movement spoke volumes. We angled southwest, away from our planned course toward the Philippines, toward deeper water. The logic was simple. If the Texas wanted to close, she'd have to commit to a high-speed approach, which would spike her noise profile and give us a firing solution. For 2 days, Mercer kept his distance. Then, just before dawn on the third day, sonar reported transient noises astern rapid blade turns, increasing speed. He was closing. The ocean is a chessboard without borders, but under the surface, range is everything. A Mk-48 can hit at over 25 nautical miles. But in reality, a submarine captain prefers to fire much closer, where the probability of a hit is near certain and countermeasures are less effective. The Texas had closed to less than 9 miles before slowing again, close enough to strike, but still outside the envelope where I'd feel comfortable returning the favor. I decided it was time to confront him not with words, but with positioning. I ordered a sharp course change toward his bearing and increased speed to 12 knots, climbing above the thermocline. Within minutes, our sonar showed him shifting away, as if we'd caught him leaning too far over the chessboard. It was a subtle move, but it told me one thing. Mercer didn't want a fight he couldn't control. We repeated the maneuver twice over the next 24 hours, each time forcing him to adjust. On the third attempt, he dropped off sonar entirely. For a moment, we thought we'd shaken him. Then our towed array picked up faint impulses active sonar, low power, coming from multiple bearings. It wasn't just the Texas. The second contact resolved into a diesel-electric sub, slow, small. Likely an old Kilo class. The third was harder to pin down, but the blade count suggested another Virginia or Los Angeles class. We were in a net. Someone, maybe Mercer, maybe someone else, had arranged this. I took the con myself and ordered a dive to maximum operational depth. The Nevada groaned under the pressure, every bolt and weld line reminding us that steel is not immune to the crushing force of the ocean. We cut through the black water like a shadow, bypassing the net. No one followed us down. When we leveled out, Green looked at me over the chart table. "They're herding us," she said simply. I didn't argue. Whoever was behind this wanted us to move in a certain direction, probably toward a specific landfall. That meant they knew something we didn't. I made the decision to break pattern entirely. We would run east, back toward the American coastline, to the one place I'd sworn we wouldn't risk unless there was no alternative, Naval Base Kitsap. It was where our patrol had begun over a year ago. If there was even a fraction of the old command structure still breathing, it would be there. We stayed deep and fast for 3 days, evading contact. The ocean was empty again, but my gut told me we were being tracked beyond sonar range. The game had shifted from a duel to a pursuit with stakes I still didn't fully understand. On the 4th day, we rose to periscope depth to take a satellite image, download something we hadn't risked in months. The photos came in grainy, fragmented, but one image made my blood run cold. The dry dock at Kitsap was occupied, not by an Ohio class, not by a surface ship, by a submarine I recognized instantly, the USS Texas. I stared at the image on the control room monitor, zooming in until the resolution broke down into pixels. Even in the distortion, the details were clear enough. The sail's shape, the hull number, the paint worn bare in long streaks. She wasn't tied up like a ship in ordinary repair. She was wedged into the dock, with scaffolding abandoned along her flanks, as if the work had been interrupted. No personnel could be seen, no visible signs of recent maintenance activity. The entire facility looked abandoned, save for the presence of that one dark shape in the water. There were 2 possibilities. Either Mercer had returned ahead of us and abandoned his boat, or she was still manned and the crew was waiting for something. Either scenario was dangerous. I ordered the periscope lowered and told Green to plot a cautious approach route, hugging the seabed where possible. Kitsap lies deep inside Puget Sound, accessible only through narrow channels and under the watchful shadow of surface terrain. Even before the collapse, any sub moving in would have been under the eyes of shore-based detection systems. Now those systems were probably dark, but probably wasn't a guarantee I could trust. We ran silent, cutting through the long, twisting underwater channels of Admiralty Inlet. The black hull of the Nevada, brushing past sediment clouds stirred by our passage. The sonar team picked up no active sweeps, but once, just past Whidbey Island, we caught the faint whine of a distant propeller, slow, steady, and not on any commercial track. When we finally reached the mouth of the sound and turned east toward Bremerton, I ordered us to periscope depth again, this time to take a visual sweep before committing. The shoreline was a patchwork of overgrown piers, derelict sailboats drifting at anchor, and the collapsed silhouettes of warehouses. The air above was unnervingly still, no gulls wheeling in the grey sky, no distant hum of city life. We crept closer, and the massive structures of the Kitsap dry docks began to loom through the mist. The Texas was there, as in the photo, but now I could make out more. Her hatches were closed, her sails masts retracted, and there was no watch posted on the bridge. Her mooring lines sagged in the water, algae growing thick along their lengths. If she was manned, they were making no sign of it. I had Green bring us to a halt at a safe distance while I weighed options. Surfacing outright was out of the question until we knew what waited topside. A landing party might give us answers, but it meant putting people ashore in a place where we had zero intel. The decision came down to the risk of the unknown versus the certainty of dwindling supplies. We had enough food for perhaps another 6 weeks if we rationed severely, but we were nearly out of antibiotics and painkillers. Kitsap's medical stores, if untouched, could mean the difference between survival and slow attrition. I gathered the senior staff in the wardroom: Green, Cobb Delaney, Lieutenant Ortiz from missiles, and Ensign Moore from sonar. We talked through every possible hazard-infected presence, hostile survivors, traps, even environmental dangers like gas leaks in sealed spaces. Delaney, who had been through multiple boarding actions in his career, volunteered to lead the landing party himself. He wanted 6 sailors, all armed with M4 carbines and sidearms, plus suppressed weapons for close quarters. They'd go in with body armor and full comms link to the Nevada. We surfaced under cover of a heavy afternoon fog, the mist curling over the sail as the topside watch scanned the still water. The landing party deployed in our R-Hib, the small outboard barely whispering as it pushed them toward the dock. From the control room, I monitored their helmet cams on a split-screen feed. The image was shaky, but clear enough to watch them climb onto the abandoned pier. Kitsap looked like it had been frozen in time mid-evacuation. Crates were stacked haphazardly, forklifts sat with their engines cold, and paper drifted across the asphalt in the wind. The team moved in disciplined pairs, checking corners and doorways. Delaney's voice came over comms in a low murmur. No movement. Smells like salt and rust. No bodies in sight. They reached the Texas after 15 minutes of slow advance. Her hull was streaked with rust blooms that hadn't been visible through the periscope. A thin scum line along her waterline suggested she hadn't been underway for months. Delaney tried her forward hatch locked from the inside. He knocked twice, then waited. Nothing. Then Ortiz, monitoring from my side, pointed to the feed. On one of the helmet cams, just at the edge of the frame, a shadow flickered past a window in the dockyard office building. The team altered course to investigate. The office was a 2-story structure with glass panels along the front. Inside, it was dark. They breached the main door, weapons up, flashlights cutting through dust motes and peeling paint. The first floor was empty except for overturned chairs and a long-dried coffee spill on the floor. But on the second floor, in what had once been the base commander's office, they found signs of recent habitation: a makeshift cot, half-eaten canned food, and a plastic jug of water. Someone had been living here, and not long ago. Delaney was about to sweep the rest of the building when the sound came. A distant, metallic bang from somewhere deeper in the dock complex. It echoed strangely, making it impossible to judge distance. The team froze, listening. A second bang followed, louder, then a dragging noise. From the camera feeds, I could see Green stiffen beside me. I knew that sound. We'd all heard recordings. The infected were here. Delaney pulled his team back toward the R-Hib, keeping tight formation, their rifles covering every shadow. The fog was thicker now, rolling in waves across the water. As they descended the pier, a figure emerged from the mist, staggering, its clothes hanging in tatters, face obscured. It moved faster when it saw them. Then another appeared, and another. Delaney didn't waste time. His suppressed rifle coughed twice, and the first figure dropped. The others slowed but kept coming. The team kept moving, opening controlled fire only when they had to, never breaking pace toward the boat. They made it back aboard without losses, but none of us missed the way the fog behind them churned with movement, dozens of shapes now converging on the dock. Whatever had happened here, the place was no longer safe for extended exploration. We cast off immediately, diving as soon as the Arhib was secured. As the Nevada slipped beneath the surface, I looked back through the periscope one last time. The USS Texas remained there in the dry dock, silent and unmoving, a steel tomb in the mist. The image stayed in my mind, long after the grey water swallowed her from view. It wasn't just the emptiness that unsettled me, it was the sense of intent. She wasn't a wreck, she was waiting. In the wardroom, the landing party stripped off their gear, silent except for the clatter of rifle bolts being cleared and magazines checked. Delaney handed me a battered waterproof satchel. "Found this in the dockmaster's office," he said. "Hidden behind a false panel, paper files, some digital media. Figured you'd want first look." Inside were 3 manila folders sealed in plastic, a small SSD drive, and a laminated access card bearing the insignia of Submarine Group 9. The paper files were mundane, inventory lists, maintenance schedules, until I reached the last one. It was a movement log from early in the outbreak, listing all submarine departures from Kitsap. Most of it was what I already knew. The Nevada, the Louisiana, the Alabama, the Kentucky, and the Texas all left within a week of each other. But the final entry was different. Dated nearly 3 weeks after all other vessels had departed, it recorded an unscheduled departure of the Texas, authorized by a Captain David Mercer, with destination code LZ4. There was no such code in any chart I knew. In the remarks column, one line had been scrawled by hand. Per direct order com subpack, cargo sealed, no deck access. The SSD was encrypted, but Ortiz in missile control had once been a systems security officer. Within a few hours, he had bypassed the access lock and pulled up a set of fragmented messages. Most were incomplete, but one survived intact enough to make sense. Mercer, priority retrieval of package from LZ4. Maintain operational security. Package contains continuity assets critical to post-event command structure. Extreme security risk, if compromised. Do not engage other fleet assets without direct clearance. Continuity assets. In Cold War language, that could mean anything from nuclear launch protocols to biological materials. In the context of the collapse, it could just as easily mean something worse. Whatever it was, Mercer had taken the Texas out with sealed cargo and strict orders to avoid contact. The more I read, the more certain I became that Mercer's interest in us, and our tridents, was tied to that cargo. And if the Texas was sitting abandoned at Kitsap, there were only 2 possibilities. The package was still aboard, or Mercer had delivered it somewhere else and left his sub as bait. We set a slow eastward course into deeper waters of the Strait of Juan de Fuca, while I thought through the possibilities. If the cargo was still on the Texas, we could try a night infiltration dive, breach her hull and retrieve it. But that meant risking crew in a confined, darkened submarine that might be flooded or crawling with infected, if such things could even survive long inside. If Mercer had delivered the cargo, the SSD's data might give us clues about where. Ortiz and Moore worked through the fragmented files, cross-referencing old Navaria charts and radio beacons. One repeated coordinate stood out: 51 degrees 27 N, 179 degrees 12 E Aleutian waters near Amchitka Island, the site of Cold War nuclear tests, now abandoned. The choice was simple in theory: go after the Texas now, or chase Mercer's trail to the Aleutians. In reality, neither was simple. Both were traps waiting to be sprung. But the Aleutians were remote, with fewer civilian survivors to complicate things. That tipped the balance. I called the senior staff to the control room and laid it out. Green was the first to speak. If Mercer's not in the Aleutians, he'll know we've gone after his package. He's already shown he can follow us undetected for days. This could turn into a running hunt. Delaney, arms crossed, added, "If it's weapons tech and he's planning to marry it with your tridents, he doesn't need to win a fight. He just needs you out of the way long enough to get to them." That was exactly the point. The only way to keep our missiles out of play was to keep moving and deny him the chance to corner us. The Aleutians were a calculated gamble, but so was every day we stayed at sea. We made the transit north under rough seas, the hull shuddering as Pacific swells hammered against the sail. Life aboard settled into its familiar rhythm. 4-hour watch rotations, drills to keep the crew sharp, the constant hum of life support fans. But under the surface calm, everyone knew this mission was different. We weren't just hiding anymore. We were actively hunting. 2 days from the coordinates, sonar picked up something unexpected. A broad, irregular return from the seafloor. At first glance, it looked like a ridge, but the mapping system showed no feature there. We slowed and dropped to within 100 meters of the bottom. As the image resolved, it became clear. A sunken freighter, hull broken in two. The name Northern Reach barely visible through layers of marine growth. The wreck was in surprisingly shallow water for this stretch of ocean, just under 120 meters, making it accessible to divers, and it was directly on our plotted path to Amchitka. Green suggested we inspect it, arguing that the odds of a freighter sitting here without some connection to Mercer's route were slim. We sent down a 2-man dive team in full rebreather gear. Their helmet cams flickered in the dim light as they moved along the rusting deck. The cargo hatches were open, revealing empty holds. But near the bridge, they found something that made my pulse quicken. A metal crate with US Navy markings and a hazard symbol partially obscured by silt. They secured the crate to a lift bag and brought it to the surface. In the torpedo room, we cut the seals and lifted the lid. Inside, packed in foam, were 4 heavy cylinders marked BN-77. I recognized the designation from old inventory lists. They were biosecure canisters, the kind used for transporting high-risk pathogens. Whatever was in Mercer's continuity asset order, it wasn't conventional weapons. We stored the canisters in the most secure compartment aboard, sealed behind multiple locked hatches and under constant watch. The crew didn't need details. They just needed to know it was dangerous and not to be touched. But the find changed the equation entirely. If Mercer had been moving this kind of cargo, then LZ-4 might not be a base at all. It could be a storage site, or worse, a dispersal point. We resumed course for Amchitka, the weight of those canisters pressing on my mind. If they were connected to the infection that had ended the world, then we were now carrying a fragment of the apocalypse itself. The Nevada's reactors hummed with steady confidence, pushing us through the frigid depths of the Bering Sea, but every turn of the screws felt heavier than it should have. My mind kept going back to the satellite photos of Kitsap, the USS Texas, sealed away like some relic, and the possibility that whatever was in those canisters had been moved, hidden, or even deliberately left behind. The crew didn't know exactly what we'd recovered. I'd ordered the container hold in Missile Tube 10 sealed under double lock procedures, with only myself, the XO, and Chief McKenna holding the access keys. Officially, it was listed as biological material hazardous, which was enough to make most sailors steer clear without further questions. Still, in a boat of 155 people, rumors were inevitable. Some said it was medical supplies from before the outbreak, possibly a vaccine. Others whispered it was the original virus, the one that had caused the collapse. By the second day out, the sea state above had deteriorated. Even submerged, we could feel the pressure changes as deep swells passed overhead, long rolling motions that the stabilizers corrected, but never fully eliminated. In the wardroom, the XO, Commander Ethan Carraway, spread out our charts over the table while we drank coffee that had been brewed too strong for most people's taste, but was exactly right for life under the polar seas. "Sir, if we hug the Aleutian chain and make for Amchitka by the channel here," Caraway said, tapping a narrow passage between Bering Island and the western tip of the Aleutians, "we cut 2 days off transit, but it's shallow enough that we'll have to navigate with extreme caution. Thermal layers are thin there. Any passive sonar buoy or drone still active could pick us up." I studied the map. Before the outbreak, that wouldn't have been a problem. Maritime traffic would have masked us. Now, an isolated sonar ping in an empty ocean was as good as a flare in the night sky. "We'll take the northern arc," I decided. "It's longer, but we stay deep, under the thermocline. No risks we don't have to take." For most of the crew, the days fell into the familiar rhythm of life at sea: maintenance cycles, reactor checks, drills, watch rotations. But beneath the routine was a quiet tension that had settled into all of us over the past year. We were the last confirmed operational US nuclear submarine, maybe the last in the world, and that reality had reshaped how everyone saw their duties. Petty disagreements that would have flared before were now rare. Every sailor understood that if we didn't function as a single unit, the sea would swallow us whole. On the 6th day, sonar reported a faint, intermittent contact ahead. The blade count didn't match any military profile, too slow, uneven. I ordered us to reduce speed and approach cautiously. When we rose to periscope depth to investigate, I saw it. A large fishing trawler, its paint flaking in long rust-streaked patches, drifting without power. Nets trailed from its stern like skeletal hands reaching into the black water. We debated boarding her. Supplies were always on our minds, and if the trawler had been abandoned early, she might still have stores of preserved fish or fuel. Drifting vessels were a risk. No telling what you might find aboard or who. I authorized a boarding with strict quarantine procedures. McKenna led the team, 4 sailors in full protective gear with suppressed carbines. They moved quickly, reporting back every 5 minutes. Inside, the vessel was a ghost. The galley still held bags of rice and tinned food, though most of it had spoiled from moisture. In the bridge, charts lay scattered, as though the crew had left in a hurry. The living quarters held personal effects, photos, and clothing, but no bodies. The unsettling part came when McKenna reported the radio equipment had been smashed deliberately, the panel ripped open, and wiring yanked out. Whoever had been aboard hadn't wanted to be tracked or contacted. They brought back only what was safe sealed rations, tools, and a set of charts for the North Pacific. One of the charts had a small island circled in red ink, far west of Amchitka. There was no name, just a notation. Safe harbor? For the rest of that day, I kept the chart on the plotting table in my quarters, glancing at it every time I passed. We didn't have the luxury to go wandering off course for a mystery location, but it was hard to ignore that it might be the work of survivors. In a year of silence, any sign of human life was a thread worth holding onto. 2 nights later, we crossed into deeper water. The Bering Sea floor dropped away beneath us into a trench, the sonar display showing nothing but open black beneath our keel. It was then that we picked up the sound. At first it was faint, a low-frequency thrum, so steady it blended with background noise. But as we adjusted course, the signal grew stronger. Caraway and the sonar chief spent an hour isolating the contact before calling me to the control room. "Captain," the sonar chief said, pointing at the waterfall display, "that's not geological, it's mechanical, probably a pump or turbine. Could be a deep-sea station." "A station?" I asked. "Out here?" "Or a sub," Caraway added quietly. We listened for another 20 minutes, but no screw noise followed, just the hum. Eventually, I ordered us to alter course 20 degrees east and drop deeper, keeping the source off our beam. The ocean is full of strange sounds, but out here, in the silence of a dead world, any man-made noise was something to be treated as a threat. By the time we made visual on Amchitka's coastline through the scope, The weather had turned foul horizontal sleet that hissed against the lens. The island looked as it always had, barren, wind-scoured and empty except for the low shapes of abandoned Cold War-era installations. We'd chosen it because of its isolation and the fact that its old military airstrip might serve as a landing site if we ever linked up with survivors who had aircraft. We surfaced just offshore under cover of darkness, launching the Arhib with a small shore party to scout the old base. The plan was simple: secure the site, set up temporary storage for the canisters, and run maintenance checks on our reactor while resupplying from cached stores we'd hidden there months earlier. The island was as silent as the grave, but the first report from the shore team stopped me cold. Fresh footprints in the snow. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.